Should have asked you if you were ready, Dana. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the September 30th, 2024 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. We're going to get started today with our Urban Renewal Agency projects with Dana Pierce from Community Development.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, members of the public. I'm Dana Pierce. I'm in the Economic Development Division here at the city, and I'm going to be reviewing the Urban Renewal Agency projects and funding. Subject and summary: this is our quarterly workshop for the URA board to discuss current and upcoming goals and activities for the Urban Renewal Agency. And we're going to be reviewing the draft 5-year implementation strategy, including financials and catalyst projects. It relates to council goals with facilitating a sustainable, manageable growth and provide cooperative, shared leadership involving council, staff, and the community. The agenda for this presentation is going to be a review of that 5-year implementation strategy. We're going to look at a review for the July workshop that we had and a memo that you have in front of you. We'll look at next steps and some activity updates, as well as a financial review, some key action steps, and a discussion about public involvement. So in front of you have a memo that was provided by Elaine Howard from our July 12th workshop. Just summarizing it, you can see there's 2 pages of financials. There's some figures that show the income, expenditures, and financial capacity, and then another figure on page 3 that shows the project allocations and expenditures through FY24. Part of that workshop was discussing projects for the urban renewal. We also discussed potential catalyst projects. Some of those that were on that list were the library, the Redwood Tower, Caveman Plaza, and a mixed-use project, like on the riverfront. And also the Urban Renewal Agency Board did project ranking at that workshop. So we ranked the water plant debt service as number 1, then Owl Lot Plaza and the Catalyst project. Following that, these projects were relatively equally ranked, and that would be the Southeast Industrial Water and Sewer Infrastructure, the Building Rehab Loan and Grant Program, the public swimming pool, and housing development. We also discussed how a bond or loan could increase the URA funding capacity, and we estimated that was going to be approximately $12 million. And then there are next steps listed here in the summary. So I'm going to go through each of those next steps to update you on what's happened since July. So the first next step that was listed is to investigate the details of a new bond or loan. So on July 17th, staff met with Piper Sandlin, a financial consultant, to discuss what this would look like. What was really clear is that loans need to have an identified project that is shovel-ready in order to establish what that loan would be. But what we could determine was, amounts and terms, of course, vary for loans, but the timing to get the funds we've established as being approximately 2 years from knowing what the project is to when the funds would be issued. The types of projects we looked at too were either public purpose or private projects. In the case of public purpose projects, it's you would pay debt service. The Urban Renewal Agency would pay debt service, which is full faith and credit. It's lower risk in that scenario. A private project would essentially be TIF pledged funds that would be used to repay debt. So it's higher risk, higher interest. The next step, number 2, established here was to complete the meetings on the public swimming pool and establish a financial strategy. So that did happen on August 5th. The Caveman Pool Council discussion happened. September 16th, consensus was reached for the Urban Renewal Agency funding of the Caveman Pool. The project total allocations are just over $6 million, and we expect Urban Renewal to pay $5 million, ARPA to pay $1.2, and the remaining to come from LB 6393. The next step was to examine potential funding to projects, and you can see in the memo that it's broken down under number 3 to establish the full financial capacity. We did complete that at the workshop, and it was established that approximately $14.5 million of unencumbered funds could go to pursue projects over the next 5 years. We also have established the cost of the Southeast Industrial Project for the sewer and water infrastructure. It's approximately $5 million for the sewer connection, and then it would be between 10 and 15 million for the water project to go east of Jones Creek. Staff is also exploring funding options with Business Oregon on this project. We also have established the cost of completing the Owl Lot Plaza. It's about $1.5 million, and we expect that could be divided across FY25 and 26. And finally, number 4, begin pursuing a catalyst project. Well, on August 21st, the agency approved a resolution to purchase a real property at the corner of Midland and Washington for a future potential housing or mixed-use project. That property acquisition was $2 million. We expect that this is the priority catalyst project for the agency, but some of the other catalyst projects listed were library, Redwood Hotel, Caveman Plaza, and a riverfront mixed use. Some other considerations here, we do have an urban renewal grant program. An award was issued for Mimosa's facade improvements, and we do have 2 active applications that will support URA goals. We expect those applications to come before the board on November 6th, and if they're maximized, would be approximately $1,000 or $100,000 to the agency. We also are having ongoing discussions with 2 other potential applicants, which again, if they maximize the grant funds, could be approximately an additional $100,000 to consider. And I also listed here the grant carryover so that we can keep those funds into consideration as well. It's about $30,000. Housing incentives have been a priority for the agency. The SDC buy-down program design is complete and could be implemented at any point. So let's just step into looking at the strategic plan, the 5-year implementation strategy. Like I mentioned already, these are the priority projects that the agency has put forth. We have the water treatment plant, debt service, the Owl Lot Plaza, a catalyst project, which would be a housing development mixed-use project, the public swimming pool, and then the last 2 that are relatively equally ranked are the Southeast Industrial and the building rehab and grant program. So as we break this down, let's just look at the financials on this and how it would be. So the 5-year financial summary shows you what we have budgeted in FY25, and then what it could look like year 1, year 2 and 3, and year 4 and 5. If you put all of the projects into this first year, we wouldn't have enough funds for that. So we're looking at the possibility of splitting the pool funding between the first year and the year 2 and 3. If we just put $2 million towards the pool in that first year, and then $3 million the next year, we should be able to cover that full project with the cash flow we have coming in. There's also, you could see 2 spots highlighted behind the housing development program. The purchase of the property for $2 million is expected to go out in this fiscal year, but any additional improvements we do to that property, we would need to consider in the future years of this plan. And this is just a quick breakdown of this fiscal year. It shows you the revenues and the expected expenditures. We've discussed each of these. We've included even the potential grants coming through and have set the Caveman pool to be at the $2 million. So you can see the difference, then we're in the positive if we do that. This does leave some flexibility if more funds need to go out for the Caveman pool in the first year. You can see there is room. In order to also complete this 5-year strategy, we need to show the key action items for each year on what would happen for each of these projects. So when we look at the water treatment plant, if we were to say what happens in year 1, the loan continues. Right now it's a temporary unhoused site, but we expect to break ground on construction in May of 2025. For the Owl Lot Plaza, we expect construction to begin in this fiscal year, and there will be community engagement. An example is a Buy a Brick campaign, which you'll learn more about in the presentation following. The Caveman the Caveman Pool is in phase 2, the final design and engineering. We expect that to be about $800,000, and that the construction could begin in year 1 or year 2. For the Catalyst project, which is the land acquisition that is happening in this first year, and then the grant program, we expect we would be distributing $250,000 in grants. We look at year 2 to 3. Same projects. We've got the water treatment plant. The loan continues. There's site preparation and the construction begins. For the Owl Lot Plaza, the construction would be complete between year 2 and 3, and the community would activate that space. There would be parking and events happening at the Owl Lot Plaza. For the Caveman Pool, the construction would be complete in year 2. We'd expect operating regular hours during the summer, and it would be actively used by the community in that time frame. For the Catalyst project, we would begin public engagement, envisioning for the future land use of that Washington and Midland site. And for the grant program, in that 2-year period, we'd expect $500,000 in grants to be distributed. For years 4 and 5, the water treatment plant loan would continue. The construction we expect to be completed in year 4, which would be 2028. And then for the Catalyst project, continue that public engagement for the Washington Midland site, work with an architect or design firm to develop design concepts and seek feedback from the community, the neighborhood, and citywide even. Again, with the grant program, we would expect $500,000 in that 2-year period to be distributed. And with that schedule of planned payments going out, that program would sunset in 2031 with the remaining expected funds for that project. I did want to note here too, you'll see that the Owl Lot Plaza and the Caveman Pool have dropped off the list because they're already complete. So this is where we have room for the next project that we want to add to the plan. That wraps up the 5-year strategy, but I wanted to discuss also a goal that is part of the urban renewal plan of public involvement. So goal 2, it states that the agency will maintain a citizen involvement program that ensures the opportunity for citizens to be involved in all phases of the urban renewal implementation process. And it further states objectives of 1, to provide opportunities for public input throughout the implementation of the plan, and 2, to utilize an advisory group or council-appointed task force to review substantial amendments to the plan. So with this goal, staff is looking for direction on the design of a citizen involvement program. There's potential options on how we can provide that. It could be a regular standing committee that meets quarterly or semi-annually to review activities for the agency. It could be a more formal tool or mechanism to allow for public comments, maybe through the website or some other method. Direct mailers to property owners, maybe 2 times a year to solicit feedback. Or an advisory committee that works closely with the board on projects and direction for the agency. Those are just some ideas. It could be any mix of these, or it could be something that you guys have thought of. So today's call to action, we're looking for the council adoption of the 5-year implementation strategy. And under that, we really would like to know, is the board in support of a language change to include market rate housing as part of the housing project, because currently it only allows for affordable housing. And then the other piece would be establishment of a citizen involvement program. So I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Dana. Council, what questions do you have? Valerie?
Yes, thank you, Dina. You were talking about the Catalyst project, the $2 million project, and I know that part of it is we wanted to make it private, public-private. So I see where we're doing the plans. At some point, will we put an RFP or something out to have somebody else come up with? I mean, that's just kind of the whole idea, is to partner with private enterprise to make it so it's not just us, but it's private. So where in the line do we bring them on? Just in terms of going out for an RFP to see what somebody else could do with that property.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and I think if we think that it would be within that 5-year period, we could include that. Maybe in the 4 to 5 year range, establish an RFP for a developer.
Yeah, I think that's important because I think the whole purpose of the plan is to try to get as much private, to try to, utilize the private industry to come in and do things and not have it all be us. So that's one thing I would like to see on that. And I would like to see it be open to market rate. That's my opinion, but I'll just put that out there.
Rob?
So Valerie, I'm not sure if I understand what exactly, I totally understand and I would agree that we want to bring in outside ideas and private sector stuff potentially, but what exactly would the RFP be requesting? What would be an RFP for?
It would be to see what somebody else, a developer out there might want to do in terms of, we could put on the RFP that we want it to be housing and mixed use, but to have them come forward. I just hate to go through an architectural design and the whole thing on us if there's a developer out there who wants to develop that property and is willing to do that on their own. So that's how I'm looking at it.
So it's an RFP for design, for different designs?
Yeah, how they might utilize that piece of property, what they could do with that piece of property.
Brian, then Dwayne.
Thank you. I just had a question on the implementation timeline for the Washington property. I mean, we have in years 4 and 5, work with architect design firm, and I'm just wondering why the timeline is so long for that project when it seems like maybe it could be shorter.
I can take a first crack at it anyway. So in staff level, one of the things we were looking at, we really haven't seen multifamily in this community for quite some time in terms of new development. The two that we have coming online now at Harbeck and Allen Creek, and then at the city's property on Nebraska, are affordable. But they are still going to bring on over 120 units of new multifamily. We also have 2 pre-application conferences that we've had related to market rate multifamily. So some of this is kind of a question about what's the absorption ability in Grants Pass to fill multifamily, and to kind of see how these projects as they come online, how that plays out. We do still also, in addition to the market piece, and some of the wisdom maybe of waiting for that is to look at the prepping the property, because there's a planned unit development on that property. And so there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done on that as well. So Dana and I talked about putting it in 4 and 5, but obviously that's up for discussion today. I think those are probably the 2 main reasons why we put it out that far. It certainly doesn't mean that the council can't continue to have discussions about ideas. And as Councilor Pell and Councilor Lovelace just talked about, what does that RFP look like, and having internal conversations at the city as well as with our community about what the visions are for that property. So those would all be things that could happen prior to that year 4 and 5 and the actual RFP going out.
Okay, thank you.
Dwayne?
My question's kind of along that same line as on the RFP, wouldn't we just do like we did Allenwood? Throw it out there and see what comes. I'm a little confused why we wait 3 or 4 years when we just threw, we did like a pre for Allenwood, and all of a sudden we got this person willing to take care of it. So maybe I'm answering my own question, but I think 3 or 4 or 5 years seems a little too far out there. So I mean, why wouldn't we send it out as soon as possible?
No, I think it's a valid point. We could with the Allenwood property that again had that required affordability component, and so you do have funding that's allocated through the state to assist with those projects. as compared to a market rate project, which is what we understand the Midland, Washington property to be. At least that's the direction that we've heard. So, but we could begin those conversations as soon as the board is ready.
Valerie?
I just have a question, because you mentioned something about, it's a PUD up there. Can you explain how that adds to the, a difference in that land?
Yeah, so the Smith Medical Planned Unit development that was done in the 80s actually specifies parking, specifies lot design, has a whole series of things. The private street, those are private streets under that PUD, not public streets. There's a PUD that is essentially attached to all of the deeds out there that kind of commits those to that. So that's going to have to be repealed before really any new development can proceed, because that's really kind of inhibits what can happen out there today.
And could that happen any time? I mean, could we start working on that piece at any time? Just curiosity.
We could. I mean, I think ideally, from a planning perspective, it would be preferable to sort of have at least a vision for what that property is going to be developed as, rather than just revoke the PUD and then just leave it as it is today, which would kind of leave some property lines out there. You would have easements that need to be addressed. So it's helpful to have it sort of like as one process where you take the PUD off and then you establish the new easements, you establish the new property lines kind of as one process.
And so my next question is, could you put it out with an RFP in case somebody wanted and knew what they were dealing with, and then could use that, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, you could, except there's some, it's pretty restrictive in terms of the uses that are there. I didn't hear the board talking about medical uses, which is the primary use that the PUD is for, as being your desired land use. But, there is that general commercial frontage that's on 6th Street that is set for general commercial use, which clinics or other medical uses are allowed for. So I think from our perspective, it really comes down to, how much do you want to go through the visioning process first to see long-term what do you want to see there, versus diving in and removing the PUD and doing some of this preliminary work that may have to be redone.
Thank you.
Other questions? Brian?
Yeah, on the chart that has the 5-year financial summary chart, it's not clear, at least I'm not seeing on here, we have the totals at the bottom, but I'm not sure how much leeway we have as far as extra surplus funding that's not being used that year. Do you have any rough idea of what those numbers are for this?
Yeah, I can let JC speak on this, but roughly about $2 million of income we expect coming in each year in revenue. But I don't know if you have a better way to state it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the basis of the information is a little bit over $2 million in property taxes each of the years. You don't have that much committed as far as years 2 through 5. However, you kind of do if you're going to do some of the things like Dana's talking about and Brad's talking about of cleaning up the PUD. That's going to be an added expense. The timing of the potential swimming pool, again, where does that kind of fit into when you want those actions to come through? And I think the next slide that the point was tried to be made of if you put $5 million in the pool, you're actually going to be negative. So you've got a lot of things in your shopping cart for this year and not the cash to do all of them right now. But strategically, if there's a priority and timing that you guys want this stuff to happen, we could start putting these financial plans in place.
Okay, thanks. And then I just had one other question on that chart. At the bottom, it's got the debt service and plan administration costs, and I see that year one, it's 97,000, and then in the subsequent columns, it's a lot higher. I'm just wondering, because it's doubled 2 years. Okay, never mind, thanks.
Valerie?
Yeah, I have just a question on the grant program. Is that the grant program that is for anybody within the URA, for SDCs, or anything that they may need? Am I correct in assuming that that's what that grant program does?
Yeah, right now we have a grant program that covers several different projects, but the building rehab, I think, is primarily what people are coming in for. It does help cover, actually, it's the underdeveloped land that helps with SDCs, but there are various support mechanisms through the grant program. But it's all inclusive for anybody that's in the urban renewal.
Okay,
Yeah.
and I was kind of thinking and knowing that the library is in the urban renewal, and one of the things that we've said is that we'd like to see that happen, but that would be an avenue by which we could help them with like SDCs and city infrastructure, because they are in the urban renewal. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions? Regarding the public input process, is there anything that we have done so far?
Right now, I send a message out to all of the affected taxing districts when there's a URA meeting occurring. I think that's mostly it. Except for, actually Bragg did speak on this. This was before I was here, but there was a public engagement process they did. Go ahead.
Yeah, we did do a community forum in the chambers here where we invited property owners in the URA to come. I don't know, we had maybe 15 or so. That was pretty early on, I think probably about 3.5, 4 years ago. So as far as a specific outreach to the URA property owners, that was it. Of course, you had the task force discussion, about 1.5 years ago about whether you wanted to form a task force. You decided to take that within the board itself, so that and that's what sort of triggered the Elaine Howard workshop. So I think what our goal today was just to point out that the adopted plan does have this goal in it. There's nothing to say that the URA board couldn't continue to handle all of that on its own, but if you did make that sort of a final decision, staff's recommendation would be to take that out of the plan. Because right now the plan does call for some sort of continued community involvement in the URA.
Valerie?
Yes, and I was here when we did the first, and I was surprised at how many people did show up when we had a forum. So, the interest is there, and I would do the same thing now. Before we move forward, I would have a forum or something along those lines at least, to make sure that the public is aware of what we're doing and what the land is, because a lot of people don't even know what it is, as we well know. So I think by publicizing it and at least having a forum saying, okay, we have come up with a 5-year plan, give us input as to what you think. I think that would be very important to do sooner than later.
Are you suggesting doing it after the 5-year plan is adopted or prior to adoption?
Prior to the adoption. I'd say prior to the adoption, we need to go out and put it out there and let them know what we are, and then make the adoption afterwards.
Any other questions before we just move into discussion on that? All right, thanks, Dana. Brian?
Yeah, I was just going to follow up on what Valerie was saying. I think having like an annual forum kind of thing, similar to how we do CDBG, where, we have once a year where, we get public involvement and we go over the plan, so there's opportunity for comment. I think that would be good.
Are you suggesting as part of a council meeting or in a separate forum? Anybody? Dwayne?
I wasn't going to comment on his.
Okay. Valerie?
Can I?
I think would behoove us to do separate personally, because with public comment and everything else that's coming through right now, that we
To
need
just
something.
focus on
Just
URA.
focus on the, yeah,
Okay,
URA.
is that what you were thinking as well, Brian? Okay. Dwayne?
Yeah, I was just going to make some comments on the discussion of this, and I think we need to definitely work and, or remove whatever the PED on that Catalyst property is. I think we all agreed that we wanted to move forward on this property, and I don't think 3 to 5 years is the plan that, I could be wrong, but I think most of us wanted to move forward as soon as possible on it. And I think an RFP would be a thing that we need to get moving on as soon as staff can do that. So that'd be another suggestion. I'm a little worried about spending all the money down at this point. We have a lot of unknown cost. As Brad said, we don't know some of these costs that are coming up. So I don't think it'd be smart to sit there and spend all our money down when some of it we know we have some more expenses coming, and we don't know what those expenses are at this point. And we don't know if anything else is going to pop up in the next couple of years that could be emergency we could use this money for. We've spent a lot of money this year on properties and other things, and I just worry about having no money in reserve if something did arise. And not to say that next year they might figure something out, the council, but at this point, I mean, the last few months, we've spent a lot of money on this account, so that's just where I'm leaning to.
Anybody else? Vanessa?
I also am in support of moving up the Washington campus visionary process. I'd like to see that done closer to year one. And then from there, we can move forward on that RFP process and cleaning up the PUD and such. Also, to answer staff's question, I am in support of changing the language to market rate housing. I would like to see a majority of the housing that comes from the URA be market rate. And in terms of public involvement, I also think that I support the forum opportunity that Councilor DeLaGrange had mentioned, and also even Dana had mentioned possibly a forum online or direct mailers. I think those are both great options too.
Brian?
Yeah, I'm in support of adding mixed rate or market housing to the language as was brought up. And then Dwayne, just to answer your question on like balance of the fund, it looks like year over year, there's anywhere from a 1 million to about almost a 4 million kind of like leeway in those numbers. So there is a little bit of a cushion built in, just FYI.
Is there anybody who wants to speak up against the idea of adding market rate housing? Or are you all generally supportive of that? All right, that was an easy one. It sounds like there's some interest in doing a forum before adopting the 5-year implementation strategy. Everybody good with that? All right. And it sounds like several people are speaking up in favor of moving the Washington Midland property up faster in this timeline. I think everybody is interested in getting that going sooner rather than later. Yeah, so if staff could identify the next steps on doing that in a way that makes sense. We don't want to wait 4 or 5 years before we get more housing in this town. Anything further on URA? Joel?
So one of the things I was wondering, you know, you look in the newspaper and Amazon went down in Medford, a lot of jobs, and we have an industrial park there that we need to extend some utilities to. Have we had any interest at all? Yeah, and that could be any potential draw on the URA.
Are you speaking about a specific company coming, or just?
No, I'm speaking about any company.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if Amazon even considered us, which is kind of troubling if they didn't, but.
Yeah, I wouldn't say something specific, no. We do see some expansions happening out there from companies that are currently here. We do know that there is active development happening on some of the property, but I don't have specific
businesses identified in that scenario.
I did.
I did ask SoReady about the Amazon project, and they had a 15-acre campus that they were planning to build, and we don't have that amount of space, and they were also looking to add 200 employees, which Grants Pass doesn't have that workforce as readily available as the Medford area.
Yeah, that's true, very true.
Anything further? Hey, JC.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that staff has clear direction and make sure that we're doing it with what I'm hearing. Based on the information was given, we want to proceed with the outlot first, and then the next priority would be to do the Washington property cleanup, and then potentially the pool after that as far as our ranking, because potentially you may not have all dollars to do all three right now. So I just wanted to say it back to you and how I heard that.
Well, I would say the pool is dependent on ARPA funding, so it needs to be going right now, right?
Kind of, that'll come up later in today's discussion too, where the timing of that may change based on what we've learned through some legal language. So yes, but I just want to make sure if there's X amount of dollars, which projects do you want to see done first?
Okay, it's a little bit different spin, I guess, than the direction that I was just hearing. Maybe we need to have that pool discussion. Brian?
Well, I mean, I thought the whole point of this plan was so that that was like taken care of. We have $6.3 million in there right now. We have $2.8 million coming in this year, and that more than meets the line item requirements for year one. So I'm not totally sure why we're getting asked that.
So that's with $2 million, right, for this year, which goes through June 30th. That means construction won't potentially be completed for another year after that. So you're talking November 25, which normally, I would say, Jason, construction doesn't necessarily happen in the winter time. So then you're looking towards 2026 for the pool.
I think I would probably say that every project is a tier one priority, and if we get into bottleneck issues, then bring it back to us and we can deal with it then.
And I would just add too, is the visioning, I think, doesn't, to me, cost a lot of money. I mean, I think we just want to talk about it and envision it and not necessarily spend money, but just as a URA board and with the public, just talk about what do we have hopes and what do we want to do with that piece of property. So I would agree that what we have, the pool is important. I think at this point in time, we've drug our feet so long that I really do want to see that move forward as easily. And I understand, like I said, the years and all that's going to flux, but my idea on is the visioning is not an expensive piece of the equation.
Is that specific to the Washington property? Okay.
Yeah.
Dwayne, did you have something? No?
I was a little confused because I think the pool, all matters if they get the shell in or not. That's the main thing. You can't, if they can get the shell in by the fall, then they can continue to work. If they can't get the shell in by the fall, then they can't work because it'll fill full of water. So just my experience. So, I mean, that's really up in the air how fast the city and them are going to work. So we're speculating today, I think. That's all I really have to say.
Does that help at all?
Staff will do their best to do the board's wishes.
Okay, yeah, I think as far as that Washington property goes, council just doesn't want to see it, intentionally delayed until years 4 or 5, but the spending, obviously, we're not really ready for a plan that would cost money at this point. And we need to do that forum on the 5-year implementation plan before we vote on any of this. So I think that's where we're at regarding that. Owl Lot is up next.
Good morning. Al Plaza update. So this is primarily intended as just that, an update, kind of more educational, to let you know where we're at on it. Tagging on to the last discussion, this one is the furthest along, because as you'll see today, we actually have pretty much close to final engineering completed on the project. So in terms of the URA spending, we certainly envision this being the first. And it's exciting because this would really be the first $1+ million project for the Urban Renewal Agency. And I think it's very appropriate that it's the Outlet Plaza in terms of its ability to revitalize and invigorate, downtown, which is one of the focal points for the Urban Renewal Agency. So I think this background you are all very familiar with. We did do quite a bit of community outreach and survey work last summer in '23, and then about a year ago, James Love presented to this body the final overall concept for how the plaza would come out. Council voiced support for that, and then directed staff to proceed with phase 2, which was the detailed engineering. In January of this year, Thornton Engineering was identified as the project engineer, and then has been working very thoroughly on that for the last several months, including James Love. He's the landscape designer on the project. Thornton is doing the civil engineering work. And then July of this year, you affirmed that this is one of your catalyst projects. So just a couple of slides showing you what the actual engineering is looking like. Let me pull up this. So on the top here, these are just street sections. So if you were looking on 5th Street from Alley to the H Street, this is kind of what that cross section is going to look like. We've got 2 10-foot travel lanes, which is no different than what we have today. We have 8.5-foot parking aisles on both sides. Those will become pavers. The driving aisles will remain asphalt. New sidewalk, new street trees. This catenary lighting would be visible just in that one block between the alley and H. And then this would be the view kind of going from G to the alley. The main difference being you wouldn't see the parking lot from that perspective. So no real change to the dimensions of what it's going to feel out there. I think the biggest difference on this, in terms of driving it or as a pedestrian, is going to be the brick pavers that are along the sides, both sides of 5th Street. So here are the 2 intersections. This is on the right-hand side, it would be the intersection of G and 5th, and on the left is the intersection of H and 5th. So just to remind the council, these are designed as raised intersections. It'll be concrete, stamped concrete. So it'll be kind of a platform feel as you approach those. And then you will see also again, the lighting that is in this area. We'll see how it goes. There is that piece of artwork that was done here at the corner of H and 5th. So we'll be looking at that over the next month or so in terms of preservation. The others, the plans do call out for new sidewalk, and that would be concrete. And then, of course, we've got no street trees today in the plaza, so those will be added in. The main difference in the 2 intersections, the G Street one is a little bit more elongated, has a longer extension on it. The H one is a little more of a square design. The plaza itself, a couple of the features here. We've got the new shade sail, so that's going to offer that shade during the summer months. That would likely be taken down during the winter, but that can go either way. So that's being held up by the new posts. There are a couple of these that are actually And Thornton did a good job trying to find light posts that actually have extensions on them. So you'll still have the antique light post, but then there'll be an extension on it that will provide that support for the shade sail. And you'll be happy to know that one additional parking space after they did all the engineering and the specific layout work was gained. So 26 parking spaces instead of 25 today. Those parking stripes are going to be inlaid with a different color brick. So that will, I think, be a nice feature as well. It's got 5 benches. There's a couple of bike racks in there. 10 new trees, there's 1 existing, and then there's about 30 bollards that will be around the perimeter. And again, that the council had raised a few concerns about the fact that it's curbless and ensuring safety. So I think those bollards will be fairly closely spaced and visually coming up about 3 feet will kind of help provide some of that safety that you were asking for. Here's the engineer's cost estimate, coming in about 1.6 on the total. This contingency is probably a little high for this type project, but as you know, we like to have that in there. Biggest cost coming in at that wearing surfaces, the pavers. That paver work is very labor intensive, so that does add that cost there. We had sent an email around a couple of months ago about whether the council was interested in having a buy a brick campaign for this project. We did identify 2 locations, one along 5th Street and then one along H Street, that would be highlighted and sort of provide that visual without going into the driving area itself. So these would still be in the pedestrian area. It ends up to be about 435 bricks. So we talked about kind of an all-inclusive campaign versus more of a staff design. There's several companies out there that do this work. We could go with that. I think at this point, because we're only talking about, a fairly limited number of bricks, there just weren't other locations around the plaza that really lent itself well, to having those without the potential for damage and other things like that. So I think because the number came down, we're at this point moving towards a staff design campaign. So we would kick that off very soon and offer that out to the public, and then November, December, prepare and publish the RFP, January, February-ish, have the resolution come back to you for the construction contract where you award that, and then spring or early summer, start construction. Then in terms of the cost implication, we do have $350,000 budgeted this year. We have spent about $52,000, so that leaves just under $300,000 in the LB account, which is also URA money, not to be confused. And then so that we would anticipate a transfer from the URA to that LB account of about 1.4 to 1.5 million. Given the timeline, again, that probably could be divided and split between FY25 and FY26. So I think that'll, getting back to your earlier discussion about how's that cash flow going to work, we will have a much better idea of exactly when those monies will be needed, when the, early springish when that contract is awarded. So I think that's all staff has. That's call to action is really just mainly informational, and then we'll continue with implementing these next steps.
I did have a question, because at one point in time when we were talking about the lighting on 5th Street, there was a problem with the fire egress. Was that all worked out so that we don't have any egress or problems or whatever? Getting fire trucks down that?
Yes, okay. Yes. Well, the alley is going to continue to be fully open. Okay. So that will be, and then being able to come down 5th at least to the alley. Okay. So that is an option. We still need to work with our new fire chief, who's been on a week to get his feedback. So if there's any change to that, we would bring it back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Rick?
Thank you, Brad. Could you go to slide 7? So in the wearing services, $730,000, you talked about stamped concrete versus the bricks. Do you know what the ratio would be in there on that price?
I do not. So the stamped concrete is going to be the intersections of 5th and H and 5th and G. The pavers would be the
Sidewalks?
well, not the sidewalk, but the parking aisles along 5th Street, and then the plaza itself. So those are kind of the two areas where you would have the paving work done.
So the sidewalk would be conventional flat concrete?
Yeah, they have it called out, I think, as some additional kind of stamp design, but it's a concrete sidewalk.
Okay. And do we have a breakout on cost on the parking area for the bricks? And those bricks wouldn't be you pointed out the ones with the names on them be in a special area.
Correct.
So do we have a breakout cost on the brick parking?
There is a rough estimate. I think at this point, Jim Love is still identifying the final, contractor and or supplier for those bricks. So they're confident that they're in the ballpark on that one, but we don't have a specific number.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there would be a substantial cost savings of having that area stamped concrete as well. Would the brick look to it? That would be a question. Thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you. I think overall it's looking really good. I do agree with Rick that I think if there are ways to potentially cut costs a little bit with some of the wearing surfaces, I think, to me, having pavers in the parking area is a nice to have, not a need to have. It doesn't detract from the project. So, if there's $100,000 or $200,000 of savings by just having that match the rest of the street, I think I would personally be in favor of it. So, if there's cost savings potential for wearing surfaces, I think, we'd probably like to hear about them to keep the costs under control for this project. I was going to ask about I'm just thinking about the way that events are held there now, and I have a concern with new trees and the shade sail, and I saw the sketch, and it looks like there's a lot less visibility to where a stage would be potentially with this design. And so, I don't want to go through all this and then have it be where you can only see the stage if you're like 30 feet away from the stage. So do you know if Jim and everyone is taking visibility to where a stage would be into account in this design?
Well, they certainly know that the city's desire is to have this, be multi-purpose, multifunctional space. That's known. The last couple of Art Along the Rogues, the stage has been against the owl mural, and so there are no trees here in the center of the plaza. And again, I think from a visibility standpoint, if that shade sail ends up impeding vision, that could be. I mean, we're not going to be taking it up, taking it down, taking it up, taking it down. But, if Art Along the Road continues to be the primary concert there, then I think that could potentially, you could see those sales taken down just for the rest of the season. Otherwise, the alley has the 3 trees, and probably pretty unlikely that you would have difficulty, have many viewers there. But we can certainly take a closer look to ensure that if assuming the stage is against that out mural, that there's good visibility. Is that getting to your point?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Rob?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Brian. looking at it from the diagrams, it would appear as if the shade sails could impede vision, but I'm just wondering, what are the height of the shade sails, do we know?
Yeah, I thought you might ask that. I don't know. Jason, do you happen to remember?
Because I guess my point is, Brian, is that at any kind of reasonable height, they're not, from this viewpoint on the paper, it looks like it's going to impede vision, but it might not. If it's, high like
At least
15,
6 foot
20
8.
feet or more, 20 feet or more, it's not going to be an issue.
Yeah, I think it's around 16, I think is what it ends up being, but.
Other questions? I have a question about the bricks, since it said October, and this coming week is the Art Along the Rogue. Are you planning to launch the sale this weekend? No?
I don't think we're quite
Not
there
ready
for
yet?
four days away, but.
All right. Do you have a price on the bricks? Still working on that?
So, yeah, so there's, the ones that we're looking at are actually have a plate in them. So rather than having them be lasered, which is very common, and I think is one of the, you see that frequently where it's more of kind of just a black lasered in there. There's another company that does offer a version that has a brass plate that is inset, so I mean it's still flat on the surface, but probably is more durable over time. So that those end up being in that 40-ish range, right, per brick. So if we started, around $250 per brick, that would bring in, a revenue per brick of around $150. And there's, what I say, 430 bricks, so.
Okay. Won't have to save my money just yet, huh? Anything, any other questions on this? It sounds like you don't really need direction. Everything's rolling along.
No, yeah, unless you had other comments. These are good feedback, and we'll look at those. But thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, ARPA allocations. JC's coming up for that.
Hello, I'm here today to talk about where we currently stand with ARPA and where potentially we may be going. Subject and summary, I'm going to go over the background, the onset of the ARPA, where we currently are as far as the allocation and spent, and then potential revisions to the allocation, and then this falls under all 5 of the council goals. So as a reminder, there were kind of 4 pillars for the ARPA on its onset. They were for public sector revenues, public health and economic response, premium pay for essential workers, and water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Projects needed to be obligated, allocated, contracted, insert word that is all the same, by December of 2024, and then spent by December of 2026, and then any unspent money was to be returned to the U.S. Treasury. There was a final rule published in 2022, which gave the definition of government services, which is any service traditionally provided by a government. So anything that we currently do that is as deemed as a government service. Excuse me. In 2023, they changed some of the wording and rules, adding streets as an allowed infrastructure. They also came up with the $10 million standard allowance for revenue loss. So this was meant for small cities like us, which we are underneath that $10 million mark at $9.3 million. It's for ease of reporting. There are less reporting requirements, and organization can still report as revenue loss while maintaining the original adherence to the previous 4 pillars. The recipients may use funds under revenue loss for government services. So again, we can use these funds to any service that we provide. currently, this is where we stand. Let me get my screen pointer out here. Last Friday, we sent out a memo, which is the current summary of each of the 10 allocations that are on the left. And so rather than spend another 10 minutes going through each one of the projects, there is information for where we stand with each of these. So of our $9.3 million, we've spent about $4.5 million, with about 4.9 left over that is unspent. Yep. So we have 10 allocations of the city's total $9.3 million. We've expended about 4.5 of it to date, and we have about 4.9 remaining to be spent in those allocations. So this went through legal. I'm just kind of go through this and then I'll reiterate what this says. So staff is recommending to utilize the safe harbor provision in the final rule and recognize unexpended funds as allocated towards governmental services that include but not limited to public health, economic impact, infrastructure, and affordable housing as revenue loss. So potentially we were asking for you to have staff prepare a resolution for future meeting to authorize the remaining funds as a revenue loss for government services. The council's intent of the current allocations and projects can still continue. So what does this mean? So potentially change all of our unexpended amounts into one allocation of government services, and I can potentially remove some of this 2024, 2026 requirement and give you a little bit more flexibility moving forward with some of these projects. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Dwayne?
My question is, and I didn't really look at it, I'm sorry. With all the projects and everything, is there any money left over?
Well, kind
Everything
of.
spent?
Kind of. So most of it is all allocated, right?
Allocated and expensed together, yeah.
So what you're really asking me is this 859 is available. Potentially this 52,000 plus is available. However, we're putting out another RFP, I believe, for the winter for a warming shelter.
Yeah.
This Portland Lou, this $5,200, that's available, and then this $18,000 is potentially available. So there's not a lot left that is
It's about
available.
$20,000, maybe 25,000. Of all the ARPA money not allocated or anything?
That is correct.
Okay, that's my question, thank you.
I think you just mentioned you're doing an RFP for a winter warming shelter? Is that?
I believe Amber is putting that together.
Oh, okay. I'm just wondering if somebody's been in touch with Mint because they may have already been planning to do that. Don't know. Okay. Questions I have, Rob and then Rick.
JC, can you define again what revenue loss means?
Yeah, so revenue loss. It's a standard provision in the ARPA ruling that basically is showing that the city had a hardship through COVID and impeded their services.
Is that true?
I would think every city had some kind of effect to their service and the revenues in which we received.
As I remember it, I mean, our property tax wasn't affected. So what revenues are you talking about?
So there could be utility billing.
Sorry, could be what?
Utility billing, potential permitting, right, construction.
Rick?
Thank you, J.C. So on current allocations, you indicated in those allocations, do we still have the opportunity to add additional allocations to that list, or we're confined to that?
You can still move to that list. I think part of the staff recommendation is putting it into an overall government services bucket from this point forward, which will allow you more or maximum flexibility moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
Yeah, thanks. So essentially, you're saying we can use this loophole to not have to meet the 2024, 2026 requirements. That's the basis of this whole conversation.
That's correct.
Okay. And that sounds good. My concern is that we lump this into, you know, wherever it goes, general fund or wherever it ends up, and things don't get allocated eventually. Like, my concern is that some of this money will just kind of get lost in the shuffle. You know, maybe we're not moving with as much determination as we would with a deadline, and you know, some of these things, you know, just kind of like drift away, and then that money just ends up in the general fund. So I guess that's more of a concern than a question.
Valerie?
And I think that brings me to my question, is if we move this into a lump of money, which is government services, is there any, do we still have to use that for ARPA, what was basically meant for ARPA things? I mean, that's what I'm kind of where Brian is, you know, I hate to see it just kind of, oh, we'll throw it here, we'll throw it there. I would like to see something come of it that goes under these services that are talked about here.
No, that's a good comment, question. Yes, so as a staff member, I would assume that even if we were to put this into an easier bucket, the intent would still need to be there of what ARPA potentially was there as its creation, that you would want for those monies to go towards those kinds of things. So we currently track it as it is right now, and so we can remain that, and I would expect that would be the policy board's decision if they want to change that in the future to go away from ARPA and its original intent.
Okay. Thank you.
Joel?
So I just needed to clarify something. What you said, you circled those 4 areas where there was a, for lack of a better word, surplus dollars left over that needs to go somewhere else. So then I assume that on the ones that don't have it circled, like the public safety communications repeater, that we plan on buying that, and that's what it's going to cost. And the swimming pool, I assume we plan on spending that, and that's what it's going to cost. And then the public infrastructure for affordable housing and affordable housing project, there's affordable housing, we talked about that. I'm sorry, the eligible water projects, we've expended that. So the public infrastructure for affordable housing at $1.5 million. So we plan on investing the $1.5 million in infrastructure for affordable housing there. That's the way I took what you said.
Yeah, and let me hopefully speak this back to you with other information. So the $1.5 million in the affordable housing, there are 2 RFPs awarded contracts, right?
Right.
The public safety communications repeater, based on the information, is going to be over $1 million for that project.
So there'll be no problem spending it.
Potentially, right? But it was predicated on potentially getting some other funding to do that project. So what I'm trying to do is relieve the possibility, if a plan falls through, you can move this money back into something that you want to do or feel like you needed to do with this ARPA money. Does that make sense in how I'm saying it back to you?
Yes, it does.
Trying to avoid you've obligated these monies for contracts, and what happens if the contract can't be fulfilled?
So you're actually recommending this for the entire $4.9 million?
That is correct.
Okay.
So we do have existing contracts then for affordable housing projects to spend the rest of the unallocated funds, and we do have contracts for the public infrastructure for affordable housing for the $1.5 million, but we haven't expended those funds yet.
That is correct.
Did I hear you correctly?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
DJ, and then Val.
I think I know the answer to this, but I have to ask, is there any potential for these funds being categorized as lost revenue becoming more restrictive than they currently are under the pillars of ARPA?
Could be. So if we don't currently provide that service as a city, which is a lot, right? And you wanted to push these dollars into something the city doesn't provide, that would be against the rules. having trouble coming up with an example, but we don't have a daycare, right? And so we shouldn't be investing these monies back into a daycare.
Thank you.
Valerie?
If I'm not mistaken, in the memo that was sent out about the repeater, we have actually applied, am I correct? And so there is a possibility that the grant that we were to get or whatever would actually take, we wouldn't have to have the 200,000, am I correct? Or was that something that I just read into it?
I thought, I could be wrong, I believe that it would require just a little bit more money from the general fund potentially, or from unrestricted LB funds to complete that project. So the 200,000 and then another $1 million, I think, was what the grant application was for. And there's a little bit of a gap there too.
Okay, so that was one of my questions. And then the other ones, I'm just looking at the affordable housing project and the, are these for the ones that we have already approved and are moving forward and are getting done? So that's what I'm just basically asking the two RFPs, what they are for, which projects currently that we've kind of promised money.
It's the home bridging
Okay,
and Mid-Road Foundation,
okay.
the Veterans Hillcrest
Yeah.
project.
Yeah. And so those, so they are in the process of just going through the steps to get that money, and they haven't gotten it just because of all
They're-
the,
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
They're still doing the engineering work on
Okay.
the sewer and water for both the Fruitdale cottages and the Hillcrest.
so my question to you, because we know how long everything takes, if they don't get through that by December, are they still pretty clear to get it through? Because, I mean, they don't have to finish the project by this year. They have until the 2026 to get it correct. So I'm going to assume that that's been already, they have already met the criteria for the fact that they have gone through the steps to get there. Am I correct?
Yes, my staff's in close coordination with them in terms of their other funding. But remember that the monies that ARPA is going towards is not to the projects themselves, it's to the infrastructure to serve the project. So that infrastructure needed to be done anyway in order to extend, for example, down Fruitdale, and it's going to open up additional acreage both
Right.
there and Hillcrest. So while both of them are confident that they're going to get the funding for their projects, you know, there's not, it's
Guaranteed.
not critical that, because the city's portion is still proceeding with the infrastructure piece.
Okay, and I guess my point was, really, we do know that we have designated that, and they're, you know, so that's not really free money. I mean, it's not really money going in. And how much did that come to? Did you say those two projects? Did you,
The 1.5 million.
1.5? Okay, so that's, so basically that, we've already committed to it, so there's really, unless some other crisis happened. And how about the affordable housing project? 1.9?
So that's 100% to the project at Allen Creek and Harbeck.
Okay.
That's the Jackson Housing Authority project.
Okay,
Yeah, and the line below it, the affordable housing and house programs, we've been using that for the winter warming shelter and the cooling center.
okay. Okay, I just kind of wanted to know, so they're not really the ones. And how about the portable parklets? We did those, and so the ones that have applied are already finished out, correct? And since then, have there been any other applications? I mean, it seems to me that if we haven't gotten applications, then that's pretty well closed down, because it has to be by December, correct? So that money is, at this point, you had the chance to get the city to work with you, you didn't, so we're done, correct? Okay, thank you.
All right, we have several hands lining up. It's Rick, then Brian, then Rob.
So JC, I think my question's been answered on affordable housing, but if we were to introduce traditional housing, it would not fit under the category of affordable housing, and already those monies are committed, so there's no additional leeway unless we reallocate?
Right, I think you answered your own question, and I would advise you that the original intent of ARPA money was not necessarily to go towards regular housing, but for affordable housing.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
So you're asking us you're recommending staff prepare a resolution at a future meeting to authorize remaining funds as revenue loss for government services. But we're not really actually changing anything that we're going to be spending the money on, so it's not really being recognized as revenue loss. So how legit is this? Like, have other communities done this, or are we kind of like making this up as we go, or like, what's the basis?
So I wish our attorney was here, but in talking through this, he called this the safe harbor rule, as when cities potentially were getting into a pickle like we potentially are with running out of time, that there is this availability in this rule to use it this way.
Okay.
Rob?
So for a lot of this, I mean, are we actually running out of time? We already know the dollar amounts, we already know where it's going. So why would we bother to shuffle it into one fund before we then allocate it somewhere else?
That's a really good question. So looking at the $1.5 million, there are 2 contracts. If one of those contracts after December of 2024 were to fail, right, and not proceed, those are allocated by the rules, and I'd have to send those allocations back to the federal government.
So so for the infrastructure, either way, we could put the infrastructure in, even if those particular builders backed out for whatever reason, right?
Right, but you need to have the contract in place as of December 31st, 2024. So what I'm saying is if it fails January 1st of 2025, you can't do another contract to award that at that point.
I think what you might be missing, Rob, so these allocations is kind of, as you're looking at it, a category for public infrastructure for affordable housing. That's not good enough as of the end of December. It needs to be in a contract by the end of December. And in this case, we do have 2 different contracts, but if one of those partners, was not able to complete their project, then we would have to just let the money go back to the federal government.
So earlier, JC, you mentioned that, I guess, I think Brian had a concern that, the money could essentially go down the black hole of the general fund, and you said something about that would be potentially the policy board's decision. So the policy board being who?
Council.
The council who's seated at that time. Yeah. So basically, these funds could then end up being directed anywhere in the future, essentially.
You could, should you? Probably not.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions? Val?
Well, this isn't a question. I think this is kind of more of a comment, just because I know that how long it takes sometimes from the state to get, a lot of these projects are waiting on funding coming from the state. And you can wait for a long time. I know the Ramsey, Nebraska, we're in the 3rd, and of course in the 3rd round, they changed the rules because the state can do that. And so, there's always, I can see the advantage of this just for the sake of that way the money is still there if the money doesn't come through, because they're big chunks of money. I mean, obviously they can't do the project without that state money. Correct?
Yeah, so again, I'm just trying to reiterate, I'm trying to do or give you the best flexibility and the maximum capacity for your options moving forward. Whether what you do or change the allocation to in the future is up to the council.
And I guess I'm seeing the advantage of doing it, knowing how these big chunks of money are dependent on even bigger chunks of money. And if for some reason the state backs out and is not able to provide it, then that just kind of puts us in a funk. I mean, I'm kind of like Rob, thinking, well, can't you just put the infrastructure in anyway? But the reality of it is that the infrastructure is tied to the project, correct? So that wouldn't be something that we could just automatically do.
Or there not being fallout, like, so if it's water, right? What does water need to put in as far as capital to finish out said project? And so there's a potential fallout of continuing down the path.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, JC.
When do you
No.
need a decision, or what do we need?
Yeah, I'd like some kind of direction as far as what
Yeah.
you'd like, so I can bring that for the first November meeting, because I think the second meeting in October is canceled. So
Yes.
we'll just bring a resolution that changes the potential allocation. Again, I just want to reiterate that the council's intent can continue forward. I'm just trying to make sure that we don't necessarily send money back to the federal government when we intend to use it.
Okay, I think that under the circumstances, that's, personally, I would vote to do that. I mean, I think we should put it on the meeting.
Brian?
Is it time for discussion?
It is time for discussion.
Oh, good, okay. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this. I'm not sure my level of comfortability with this right now. I can see why it would potentially be beneficial in the case if something falls through with one of these projects. However, I don't know that I'm comfortable doing it a blanket for every project if some of them are low risk, just because there is risk on the back end of reallocation, either by this council or a future council, or, you know. So I would like to probably have a better idea of which specific projects have a higher risk of falling through, and then maybe utilizing the safe harbor for that portion of the allocation, but I don't know if I'm comfortable doing it for every line and every project.
Joel?
So I imagine at the national level, there was a reason why they put this in, because communities were having a difficult time meeting the timeframes. Whether we put it under safe harbor or not, if there's going to be a problem with one of the projects, I don't think how we handle this is going to make a difference there. It would be nice if it could, but I think we need to go into this with the same emphasis, the same projects, and put it into the safe harbor provision as provided by the federal government, so that we can better manage the money if it goes beyond, if the swimming pool goes beyond, you can still get the $1.2 million to it, so forth and so on. So I'm in favor of doing that.
Vanessa?
It was not clear to me from the presentation that was sent out on Friday that the 4.9 would be asked to be sent to the safe harbor, so I'm still kind of mulling that over in my head. I did send the council some information on a couple of project ideas. Of course, one is moot at this point because I misunderstood the amount that's unallocated, but I would like the council to seriously consider, with the $24,000 that's not allocated, of supporting some type of safe parking pilot program. I did send out a mock-up of what that could look like to share with the public. This really would be just the city providing sanitation financial services to a nonprofit that chose to run a safe parking program for car campers. And it would be limited duration. It would not automatically renew, so it is finite in nature, and I think that the $24,000 would cover that, would well cover what is needed for those sanitation services. But in terms of the safe harbor rule, I think I'm concerned about any of these monies going back to the federal government. I'd like us to do what we can to retain them in our community. That would be a shame if they had to go back even one penny. So I'm leaning towards utilizing that safe harbor provision.
All right, it sounds like people are generally supportive of the idea of using the safe harbor provision. Did you want any special instructions, I guess, direction on the way you want this written up? Joel?
Just to continue the current emphasis and what we have designed and have contracts for, that's the aim.
All right. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay. Next up, we have received a motion from the Committee on Public Art that I had. too many pieces of paper up here today. Do you have a copy of it? Do you want to read it? Oh, okay. So the motion was to have the staff send a letter to the mayor and ask city council to fund public art of the month for 1 year, starting in January of 2025 at a cost of $1,500. And then they just have shared that they publish 49 photos of public art in the Grants Pass Daily Courier that appear the first weekend, in the first weekend edition of each month. It's a 24 square inch ad. So they're requesting $1,500 to run this for 12 months of 2025. And I guess I'm not clear, is there funding already allocated for that? No?
No, so part of this is stemming from what we did last year. COPA had a similar request, and so council had to move money in the budget to be able to make the similar $1,500 purchase. So basically, it's not up to staff to do that, so we would need the council's recommendation to do that.
Okay. Is that something that anyone is interested in doing?
I actually just have questions, and it's not that I'm opposed to it, because I love the public art and what has happened, but I also know that there has been money allocated to COPA for alleyways and that sort of thing, and so I'm just kind of trying to figure out what that looks like, where they're at with that amount of money, because none of the other committees get an allocated budget. COPA does, and I get it, but I also want to know where we were in their funding that they have been allocated over the last several years.
Yeah, this seems to come up about every 4 months since I've been here. So previously, years ago, there was an allocation in the general funds budget for public art. Since the last few years of budget cuts, the only amounts allocated were specifically to projects, not necessarily the committee as far as deciding what it wants to do, when it wants to do it. So the last art project was a parking lot, and I don't remember which parking lot it was, and I believe we just paid for that installation.
Is that Beaver? Okay.
Rob?
So I'm not, it's not clear to me, maybe other people, but is this $1,500 for the year, or is this $1,500 a month?
For the year.
Okay, for the year. So with regards to the funding for other art projects, what is going on with the alley mural, that the redo of the alley mural situation? My understanding is that I guess people were satisfied, or two different committees were satisfied with that revised or new artwork, I should say. And where does that stand right now?
Yeah, so as you stated, COPA had a subcommittee that met with HBSC folks. They also brought Melissa in. Melissa is the artist who did the former Cats and Dogs mural that you saw it on an appeal. They worked with her on coming up with concepts. She has drafted those concepts. It impacts 4 different property owners on the alley between the Beaver lot and 6th. One of those property owners has stated that they are not interested, so that leaves us with 3. And I believe as of last week, we have signatures from 2 of the 3, and we're waiting for the 1. But we are planning to bring those to the HBSC at their next meeting.
Okay, so did one of the property owners that, I guess, approved use of their building for the original artwork, did they drop out? Is that what happened, or?
No, for the first one, I think there were only two property owners involved.
Okay.
But it expanded to 4.
Okay. So do you happen to know that can this project move forward if there's only approval from 3 property owners? Does it matter if the 4th one wants to not be
Yeah, my
involved?
understanding is that Melissa designed the murals to be able to be placed on, the 4 individuals. So there's not an interconnectivity,
Great.
if you will, between those murals. They're self, whatever you want to call them. I mean, they can stand on their own.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right, I was going to suggest on this idea of the public art, could we just get a memo on what is planned and what's available in the budget and where it might come from if we don't have $1,500 already in an art fund? Because I know there are some other things like the utility boxes and murals, and just give us like a comprehensive budget. Is that?
Yeah, well, that's kind of it. I was going to ask, going back to Rob's question, is I know that at some point in time we put money away for alleyways. So is there still money for that project set aside in another place like the alleyways? That's what I'm asking about. And I know, like you said, the art box is a different fund. I know they've got outside funding coming in from that one. So that's what I'm just going to try to find out, is what exactly is the city funding so far in alleyways and whatever it is, because if I remember correctly, there were 2 more parking lots that did not have some sort of sculpture or artwork, and that was the original intent, was that all of the parking lots had something. I know the Redwood one they stopped because they need to redo that parking lot, and I think there was one other one, the Bear parking lot or whatever, that also has nothing in it. So I don't know if there's still fundings for that or whether that was just an ongoing. So that's what I would like too, basically a memo that kind of gets an idea of what money was allocated, or like in the case of the parking lot art, was that original, resolution or whatever, what did it say? Did it say we were, depending upon we had money, or was that a commitment we made to each of the parking lots? So I would like to have a memo about that.
Yeah, we can do a memo. Just to generically give you a synopsis of what that's going to say is previous councils gave a dollar amount for a piece of art. It did not give the continual funding year in and year out for future art. And that's done through the LB allocation process.
Yeah, I think we just don't want to make any decision on the fly today. We don't have any information about what funding might be available, what other projects are already in the works. So if we could just get a little art wrap up, that might help everybody see the big picture here. And then as far as agenda review goes, we have a meeting this Wednesday night with a public hearing regarding the Buckmaster Subdivision Water Main Extension Reimbursement District, another public hearing for the E Street Sewer Extension Reimbursement District. And the council action items are a resolution to adopt a Public Safety Advisory Committee, resolution amending time, place, and manner locations for the homeless campsites, a resolution to renew the contract with ESRI, a resolution, we're into consent calendar now, a resolution providing financial assistance to the Sobering Center, and a motion that would acknowledge the monthly investment report, followed up with an executive session regarding labor negotiations. And then our other, we just have one more meeting scheduled for this month, a workshop on October 14th. We would meet with the Home Builders Association regarding some of those private street issues that we've discussed in the past, and we need to make some additional clarification or direction on those, and system development charge deferrals, and then get a presentation on the Main Street Downtown Steering Committee, or from them rather, what's going on with the downtown group. And then our second business meeting is canceled because we have the League of Oregon Cities conference that week. Any questions about anything coming up this month? No? All right. Anything else you're hoping to get on the agenda? Brian?
Yeah, a couple things. I don't see on the future agenda formal direction on the pool project. I know that we gave consensus direction, and I know that we're waiting, I think, for maybe an RFP to be drafted. But I just want to make sure that we're keeping that top of agenda since we're currently under end-of-year allocation deadline as it stands right now. The other thing was I had a piece of paper on the dais that detailed safe parking pilot program. And I think given the fact that we've had zero uptake on that program and that the car camping is a real issue that the community wants addressed, I would like to see this on the agenda to see what our options are for that.
Rob's saying he agrees with that, with
I
the safe
agree.
parking program?
Yes.
And Val too? Okay. Yeah, regarding the pool project, Brad, what is needed from council at this point? I think,
Yeah, so staff at this point is not asking for any direction because you gave the direction on the $6.5 million option. So as you might recall, RSA, who was a designer on this project, did their best to identify the costs on the $6.5 million, but it was only about a week and a half turnaround time. So right now they are getting more solid numbers, and then we're putting together the phase 2 detailed engineering scope of work for that. So the next action anticipated for council is going to be approval of the phase 2 contract with RSA. We're guessing around 800,000. Is what it's going to look like, and that will get us to the full detailed engineering drawings for that $6.5 million option, along with the other engineering specs. So they're working on it right now. It's definitely top of mind. So we'll be putting that onto a business meeting as soon as we have that.
okay. Jason, did you have something to add? No? Okay, you picked up the mic or something over there. Anybody else have questions about agenda items? All right. Brian?
I see the executive session got moved to Wednesday, so I can move to adjourn.
Yes.
All right.
Seconded by Vanessa. All in favor of adjourning today, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, see you Wednesday night.